We're going to discuss what does it mean. Two people on a team, if they're trying to discuss what team interpreter actually means, are going to have two different perspectives. And the goal is to make sure both perspectives are included in the team's approach. If we put a CDI in, we have to discuss if this is a new field. Well, let me clarify, a new profession. But deaf interpreters have been around since school. A teacher back at residential school, for example, didn't understand, their signing wasn't as clear, and one of the students would ask another student, what did they say? And that student would interpret for them. But as a profession, as a specific field, it's new. The development of that is relatively new, it's ongoing. If you bring in a CDI, a deaf interpreter, of course it means there'll be plenty. Does that mean that as a hearing interpreter, my skills are inadequate? Or as a deaf interpreter, will the community, what will they think about me? That perhaps as a professional interpreter, there'll be concerns about my competency from the deaf community. Is it enough for other deaf people to give me their approval and say, yeah, you're skilled enough to be a deaf interpreter? Is it what I feel, what I can do, what I can't do? I'm a deaf interpreter. Someone might promote themselves and say, oh, and they'd say, no, I remember you weren't involved in the community. You are not able to become a CDI. An interpreter may be met with resistance. Are all of us well-behaved and little angels growing up? Were we good students? Of course. All of us have a little history. But the point is the deaf community is strong and they're cohesive. And so they may have an opinion about whether a person is qualified to be a deaf interpreter or not. So there may be perspectives that I'm not qualified, that an individual is not qualified. The deaf community's perspective, if they bring a deaf interpreter, then perhaps the response might be, do they think I'm low and I need some special interpreter? I've always had a hearing interpreter. I'm used to a hearing interpreter. They may take offense. Perhaps there's always been a hearing interpreter there. So they might know the deaf interpreter's background or their involvement in the deaf community. They might feel there's too much going to be revealed. I've known this interpreter, I know their training, I know their background, the hearing interpreter. They may question the deaf interpreter. What knowledge, what theory, what studying, what training do you have? Are you familiar with what's required? The last time I said RID had 16 hours worth of training. The hearing interpreter has a full training program. I understand recently RID increased their background, but still, they're not comparable, the requirements for a hearing interpreter and a deaf interpreter. So they could question their knowledge and background. So suppose the hearing interpreter says, I've studied and worked hard, and this person's been brought on who's just recently become a certified CDI interpreter, then that could be a perspective that the hearing interpreter's in a position of power authority because of virtue of more experience. There's also the issue of the interpreter themselves, that their sign language is only kind of so-so in terms of skill. They're not much over here, right here is where I have that the deaf person is not involved very much in the community. Maybe it's a new deaf interpreter. They haven't yet really become involved, or they weren't involved in the community growing up. So, sure, you can sign well, but do you understand? Oh, they could explain, oh, I'm certified. I have the C in front. I'm going to tell you, I've been around. And I said loudly, I'm a certified interpreter. I'm a certified interpreter. Yeah, it's good, but what does that mean? Hearing interpreter would say, just, I'm an interpreter. I think you should have, a deaf interpreter should say, I'm a DI, I'm an interpreter. Why do we need to keep saying over and over and over again that I'm certified? To prove that you did the 16 hours or whatever the minimum requirement of training is that you passed? If you want to be recognized that you went to college, sure. But my point is, why are we emphasizing certified, certified, certified? What's the point of that? You should be able to confidently say, I'm an interpreter, and leave it at that. I have skills in this specific area, and in other areas, I'm not as skilled, to be honest. So that means my sign here is automatic. Automatic, does that mean automatically I have superior competency in every area? So we need to be careful about what that sign, what that concept certification means. And someone else will say, you're not deaf, you grew up in the mainstream program. You're not really deaf. Or look at their signing, it's very Englishy. How did they get a certification? So appreciate that there are many different interpreting views. That there's the view of the deaf community, the hearing interpreter, the deaf interpreter themselves. There's a lot of information here.